Good morning, America. Hubert Johnson here with Taxes Made Easy. Welcome to another morning here. Thank you for watching live or on rebroadcast here on the smartmoneyculture.tv. Um, we have an interesting topic today. It's something that I've covered, but we're going to take a deep dive today into dependents. Who can you claim as a dependent? And again, the list is more expansive than you might have initially thought. And again, so it's we're going to kind of walk through it. What are the rules? How does it affect people? And how can it make a big difference on your taxes? So give us a call. So if you have any questions, give us a call. But again, we got a decent amount of news today. But we're going to focus on dependents and filing. Who can you put on your tax return and save you some money? We'll be right back after this commercial. Welcome back, everybody, to Taxes Made Easy. Got some interesting things in the news today. First one is from irs.gov. They're straight from their newsroom. This isn't anything new. Again, it was just re-released yesterday. But again, I don't talk about all of these, but because of the looming tax deadline, it's important. So again, less than 2 weeks, April 15th, let's get those tax returns in. If you don't have everything, file for an extension. So you have the free file options. They have the VITA programs across the country. You have, again, there's a link for where's my refund. Should show a refund status within 24 hours after e-filing 23 tax return. So 3 to 4 days after filing a 21 or 22 return. So again, these are a lot of tools to help you see what's going on with your account and your taxpayer. Again, if you owe taxes, pay it by April 15th. If you pay the total amount by April 15th, if you can, you avoid any penalties and interest. If you do owe, once you pass that deadline, so even if you are filing an extension, if you know you're going to owe, just pay it by April 15th if you can. If not, there's quite a few different ways. Set up a payment plan. You can do a non-collectible status or consider an offer in compromise if you qualify. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 different ways to pay the IRS, and they're all listed on this article. How easy is it to file an extension? If you can get online, if you have your information from the previous year, it's very easy. You can just do it online. Now, my son, yesterday, we've been kicking him. He needed to file an extension. He's like, well, I don't know how to do it. So use form 4868, and this is an automatic instruction or automatic extension, which means anybody can file an extension and it's granted automatically. What's required on the form? It's about a third of the page towards the bottom. It's your name, address, city, state, zip code, social security number, your spouse's social security number, and then you just need to have an estimate of your tax liability for 23, how much you've made in payments, and then balance due, and then how much you're paying if you are. So again, these are estimates. They don't have to be accurate. And then you just check if you're out of the country or a non-resident. That's it. That's very easy. You can just mail it in, make sure it's postmarked by April 15th. And then again, that's form 4868. Easy peasy. Again, if you have any questions, any tax preparer can help you out. You can go to any free clinic and they can help you out. You can either do it online or just print out that first page. The total downloads, 4 pages, but it tells you exactly, on page 4, it tells you exactly where to mail it, depending on where you are in the country. Again, if you have any questions, just ask. Next article, this is from CNBC. Again, talking about the Fed rate. So again, we have very high Fed rates right now. It's led to about 8% interest, federal interest across the board. So they're saying we expect to do Fed cuts to the federal rate, which will lower borrowing costs, which will help the housing market. The problem is they keep seeing inflation. So they keep saying, and they've been saying this for months, that they're going to cut, they're going to reduce the interest rate. And then the San Francisco Fed president Mary Daly even said it's possible that there'll be 3 reductions this year, which I don't see that happening at all. But the problem is inflation is persistent. And as long as inflation is continuing to rise, it shows that if anything else, they might need to continue to raise the rates. If they just let the market run, you'd have high interest rates, high inflation, but things would cool off as the market adjusted. You can't adjust with the government controlling things. So again, by playing politics with inflation, and again, it's both parties, Republicans, Democrats, it did, kept inflation artificially low, kept the interest rate artificially low, and now we're paying the piper. And again, the damage is just starting. That's my personal opinion. So we'll see. If inflation does go down, they do plan to make cuts and do it fairly quickly. But again, it's yet to be seen what they actually do. So next article. This is just going off of property taxes. We've been talking about property taxes, and we kind of did a deep dive on these. So this is a perfect example of when property taxes jump up. What are your options? Who do you deal with? So this is a property tax issue particular to Tucson, and in particular to a certain area in Tucson. So again, property taxes are usually county driven or city driven. We have this area called Green Valley, and it's known as a retirement area. It's a nice area. You have golf courses. It's really a retirement community, and they only have one school district, and it doesn't even have a high school. So as a result, they've paid taxpayers here. They've always sent their high schoolers to the neighboring school district called Suarita and paid tuition for that. The state decided to get involved. So what ended up happening, because they weren't paying attention to small little school districts like that without a high school, they ended up collecting double on their property taxes. So you can imagine everybody's up in arms. What's going on here? What's going on here? And because the legislature made this decision and didn't think about school districts, like this, their property tax is going to stay at double until a fix is made, and it has to be done through the state legislature. So this is where you get different layers. If you have local taxes and it's being run by a city or county, it's much easier for the individuals to complain and get something done at the local level. However, when the state gets involved and makes a fix, the Republican legislature probably just didn't see this coming. Didn't see it, and now they have to fix it, but they have to wait for the entire legislature to act. So the entire state of Arizona has to sign off on this, rather than getting this fixed at the county level. So again, they're raising all kinds of stink on this, and it's a problem. So lastly, before we hit our main topic, I've been avoiding this because I don't want to focus on politics, but I'm going to go ahead and screen share this one because it's a bigger article, bigger issue. It's been in the news. But it really does hit home. So this is an article from ABC News. And yes, Hunter Biden. So it's interesting, and I'm going to try to approach this in a very nonpartisan way. But he has tax indictments. Why? Because he owed taxes and didn't pay it. Now, there's a lot of issues flying around, and I think taking a step back. Hunter's attorneys, which again, this is typical. Trump's attorneys do the same thing. They try to kick out everything that they can as they go through the process. And people have a lot of questions. Why is this happening to Hunter? Or why is he getting special treatment? So if you're on one side of the aisle, you think he's getting special treatment. If you're on the other side of the aisle, you think he's being targeted politically. Same people, you have the same arguments with Trump. If you talk about Trump, the opinions are flipped. The conservatives think he's being targeted politically, and then the liberals think he's gotten off easy. Now, I want to use this case because it is a national case. It is an important case, but kind of highlight what happens and how serious a case has to be to actually get to this point. You never, ever want to get to this point. If you get anywhere close to this, you don't want to get to this point. So on one hand, if they weren't prosecuting Trump, they probably would be prosecuting Hunter Biden. So it's just, when you go after political opponents, like they're going after Trump and have been for a long time, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And this is something even liberals have been raising concerns out, that we don't want political witch hunts. It's not healthy for democracy. So in this case, the article is about, they filed motions to dismiss. It's normal to file motions to dismiss. They're just trying to see what they can get thrown out, reduce the charges, and so they can focus on just what they have to file for. And so, again, this isn't their first time. They saw dismissal of the case earlier in the year. This also made news. They had prosecutors, had a sweetheart deal set up for Hunter Biden, and that fell through. There was an immunity agreement that they tried to sneak by the judge. The judge found it and didn't like it, and so that entire deal got kicked. So Hunter Biden's lawyers are still arguing that, look, we had immunity on the table. It was the prosecution that messed it up, not us, but the prosecution is claiming it's the Biden family that, Hunter Biden was the one that violated the terms of the deal, which that's not what I want to focus on here. So how much does he owe? $1.4 million in taxes. That's how much he owed. So he failed to pay $1.4 million in taxes during this time. He was, and he probably still is, very addicted. He's a very, very heavy drug user. I don't think there's any questions about that. But I've helped people that owed $1.4 million or more. I just had a case recently that was $5 million in tax debt. They didn't go to prison. So what's going on here? It is possible it's politically motivated. And jumping to another article here, let's stop sharing on this one. And this is an NBC News article. I'm not going to really dive into it that much. It goes more into the history, and he has a friend, Morris, who again is very politically connected, has purchased his art for we don't know how much. So again, he's probably peddling influence, one of the big concerns, but he paid off his tax debt. So when someone pays off the tax debt, the IRS typically just doesn't care anymore. They don't care who pays it. But the fact that it gets paid off is usually ends it as an issue. So we're coming up on a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Here at Taxes Made Easy, we're focusing on dependents, but I want to give my take on this Hunter Biden story. So there's some conflicting information here. His taxes were paid off by a friend And normally when someone's taxes are paid off, the IRS doesn't care anymore. So what's going on here that they're still going after Hunter Biden? And again, that kind of feeds into the idea that it is a political witch hunt. So on one hand, the taxes have been paid, no harm, no foul. But this Fred Morris, he met at a political fundraiser, and within weeks, about 6 weeks, loaned him $5 million. Now, I don't care who you are. You're not getting $5 million in 6 weeks from someone just out of the kindness of their heart. And that's what he claimed. And this guy has also been purchasing his art. And the problem is when it stinks, when it doesn't sound like a duck, quack like a duck, walk like a duck, there's usually more to it. And so this is the infamous smell test. If it doesn't smell right, if there's other issues, you're going to get in more trouble. And this is my message to everybody. This is what the takeaway should be, and this is why I'm talking about the Hunter Biden case. Don't play games with the IRS. If what you're stating in court doesn't match reality, it's going to lead to troubles. The IRS isn't stupid. It wasn't born yesterday. They are limited in their information because they don't have full information and spies on you. But they have a lot of information. They have and they have a lot of information at their fingertips. So I get surprised just the other day. I had someone that was claiming he was unemployed. The IRS came back and said, hey, he made $93,000 that year. Well, he's currently unemployed. I had to go back to the taxpayer, had to find out what's going on. The spouse was still gambling, and that had been a problem. And I went back to her and she says, well, she gets free coupons, credits, where she can go and gamble at the casino. Is she taking her own money? No, she goes and she gambles on those free coupons. Can they hold that against her? No, but it has to be explained away. It has to make sense. And so they're claiming poor, but they have this prior income, but he's been unemployed since September, hasn't worked for the last 6 months. Kind of puts things into perspective. Even though he did make that money, that's not their situation now. So the problem with Hunter Biden is that he's made representations that don't really fly. He's filed tax returns that turned out to be fraudulent. Why do I say fraudulent? Because it's been all of the news that he's received hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars through the sale of his art, through being on the board of Burisma in the Ukraine. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars that have flown through or gone through not only his accounts, but other people in the Biden family. And don't want to get into the corruption allegations at all with the Bidens. Just try to focus on why I think Hunter is having such a hard time regarding the IRS. Now, it's become such a political football that if President Biden was to just pardon his son once he's convicted, that would be massive egg on his face right before an election. It would be a very bad thing to do. He might do it on his way out if he doesn't get reelected. Who knows? Or if he gets reelected, he might pardon his son. But he has a child support case ongoing where he has cried poor, claimed that he didn't have money, trying to get his child support reduced as much as possible. And it was, from what I understand, it was set lower to begin with. And then all this information started hitting the news about him being on the Burisma board, getting $60,000 a month, etc. And what doesn't help has been his extravagant lifestyle. Jetting across the country, fancy cars, drugs, using prostitutes, all that. And I'm not trying to attack his character, but I'm saying when you go into court and you say, look, I just didn't have the money to pay, but you're blowing money as fast as you can in the millions of dollars. It looks bad. It looks bad, and you're not going to get sympathetic people on the other side of this. So this is why there were whistleblowers at the IRS. This is why when they try to give them a sweetheart deal, this and gun charges included, um, there were people and judges that looked at this and said, "No way, this guy he does not have clean hands. This is not someone that got behind with the large business, and they're paying, they're doing what they can to pay. It's about hiding assets, which is fraud. It's about having living an extravagant lifestyle. Not technically, it's not illegal. Well, some of the stuff he did was a lot of the stuff he did was illegal, but it just shows someone that had a complete disregard and thought they were untouchable. Complete disregard for the law and thought they were untouchable. That is the onus. That's the really what I think is holding Hunter Biden down and causing him problems, ongoing problems with the law. And this tax case is being held in California, so it's not exactly hostile territory to him. But again, the judge didn't dismiss a single charge against him. So when you're working with the IRS, be upfront with them. Don't try to hide things from them. Be straight with them, and it can save you so many problems. And again, I've had times where the IRS gave people deals, clients of mine deals, where they really shouldn't have. But we were able to sell a story. We were able to present the picture. Hey, this is what's going on. So again, it's a lot of it is negotiating. A lot of it is being upfront with them and being reasonable. Is it reasonable that Hunter Biden misreported his income? When he was getting millions of dollars, claiming poor on court and one court, and then the reality being something very different. It just makes him look like a bad actor all around. Now, I don't know Hunter Biden's character. What's reported in the news is always biased one way or the other. But I'm saying the overall facts does not help him in court. So if you've been playing fast and loose or whatever, it doesn't pay in the long run when things come to a head, which they almost always do. It makes sense to prepare yourself, get on track, and deal with these issues, resolve them. And that's my advice that I give to all kinds of clients is when you have been living that kind of lifestyle, get straight with the IRS, deal with it, be proactive. If they have to come and find you, and then you're trying to work out a deal, it's much harder if they actually start criminal investigations, if they start pursuing you down that road. It becomes much harder. So just want to use this as a tale of caution. What's actually going to happen with this tax case? I don't know. I haven't read up. I haven't really even followed it. Again, there's so much political opinion going both ways. It's hard to understand. So that's why I picked articles from NBC, ABC, mainstream articles that presented some good information. Now, I want to pivot here to our main topic of dependence. Now, this is an area where you can get away with a lot more than you think you could, but you better have the facts to prove it up. So the general rule of thumb, who can you claim as a dependent? The list is pretty expansive. As long as there's some kind of relation between you and the individual, you can usually claim them as a dependent. But there are two types of dependents. So you have your qualifying child dependent, and then you have just a normal dependent. So what's the difference between a qualifying child as a dependent? Is they're eligible for earned income credit. They're eligible for more school breaks. So I want to first start off with who can be a qualifying child. So normally it's anybody under the age of 19, so they're 18 and younger, and or they're under 24 and going to school full time. So, and then they have to be younger than you. So if you're 23 trying to claim your 24-year-old brother, or 22 trying to claim your 23-year-old full brother, yeah, it doesn't matter. Well, I mean, you have to be older. So we'll get into why someone can be fairly close in age to someone they're claiming if the father remarried or the mother remarried, and someone's much younger but still primary, secondary on a return. You just have to be older than whoever you're claiming as a dependent for a qualifying child. Under age 24, you just have to be a full-time student as defined by the institution that you're attending. If you're doing there are ways to do work in private industry as part of an official program, can also be considered full-time students. So basically, elementary school, junior, senior high school, college, university, technical trade, or mechanical school all count. Now, what doesn't count is on-the-job training, correspondence schools, and school offering courses only through the internet. So that's becoming more and more common, where there's a lot of internet schools, and there's more universities that are offering entire programs just through the internet. But if they're an established university and they offer courses online as well as in person, you should be able to claim that individual as a qualifying child. What kind of relationship, and I'm getting this straight from irs.gov, qualifying child rules. So you can pull that up. And you know what? I'm going to just go ahead and share this screen as well, so you can follow along with me. So again, you have to have a valid social security number, meet the 4 tests, and then not be claimed by anybody else. So test number 1 is age. That's what we're just going through here. And then the relationship. You have to have some kind of relationship from son, daughter, stepchild, adopted child, or foster child. So as long as they're legally placed in your care and have been for half of the year or more. So brother, sister, half-sister, stepsister, stepbrother. Grandchild, niece, or nephew. So again, it has to be someone younger than you that you're taking care of. An adopted child is, if there's a full legal adoption, they're considered your child for all purposes under the law. For the earned income, you can also claim a foster child if they're placed with you by a state, agency, tribal government, a tax-exempt organization, or court order. So again, if you have a foster child, it can't be, I'm just helping out with my brother's children, they're living with me. You have to have some kind of order to be able to do that. So again, pretty strict as far as they have to be for the qualifying child, this as a dependent. Now residency, they had to have lived with you half of the year or more than half of the year. So if they were born or died, unfortunately, during that year, but they lived with you for half the year, you can claim them as a qualifying child. And so they have to also live in the same home, and that includes the 50 states, DC, military bases. Does not include Guam, Virgin Islands, or Puerto Rico, but they have their own returns in Guam. My sister lived in Guam and in the military, and it was really good. You know, she would rub it and she would send us pictures of her swimming with the turtles and be like, hey, we're stuck in the normal life here. But again, they have their own rules. They have their own tax return in Guam. Not that different than a normal 1040, but it is different. If they're temporarily away from home, you can still claim them. There's an illness or hospitalization, school attendance, vacation, business, or military service. So if someone goes in the military and you're still claiming them as a dependent, that counts. If they're locked away in a juvie facility, if they've been kidnapped. So again, a little crazy. And then again, if you're a military person, there's special rules, extended active duties, kidnapped child homeless. So dig into that. Those are exceptions. Hopefully you never need to use most of those, except for the military. Joint return. So if you're filing with someone else, if you're the husband and wife, the child must not have filed a joint return with another person. So once someone gets married, that essentially cuts off your ability to claim them for EITC. So the earned income tax credit. If they can file a tax return, they can file a tax return, not claim themselves. But again, normally whenever someone is filing, they're married and then they're filing, you're not going to claim them as a qualifying child. They have their own household. Again, it's not a good idea to claim them once they're adults. Only one person may claim a qualifying child. This normally happens with divorced couples, or if you file taxes and as a parent, you're still trying to claim an adult child. So that actually happened to me. I went to the military, didn't think that I would be claimed as a dependent my very first year in the military, and my dad claimed me. And so I got surprised by that. So I wasn't able to claim myself. I had to file with no deductions or exemptions, and I ended up owing a little bit of money. So again, there's only one person can claim them. Here's some of the exemptions, and it kind of gets more into the weeds. So 2 more persons have the same qualifying child. Only one person can claim the child. So again, if you're divorced, separated, living apart, there's special rules, and that gets into the tie-in breaking rules. We're not going to spend a ton of time going into this. Typically it's whoever claims the child first gets the credit. Now, if you follow the rules and work with each other, here's some of the things to follow. But typically, if you're the second person to file a tax return, you have to prove up that they lived with you primarily. And if it was 50-50 custody and the child lived with both parents, the IRS is just going to let you deal with it in divorce court. They're not going to want to get too involved unless it's clear that the child lived with one parent or the other. So if you're living close to each other in the same school district, and the child goes back and forth between homes fairly regularly, again, it becomes a real pain, but it's easier sometimes to just figure it out in divorce court and have the person claiming the child pay more in child support or receive less in child support if they're claiming a child that the other person is supposed to claim. So when you're going to divorce court, be aware of this. It can definitely hurt. We're coming up on another break, and when we come back, we're going to focus on not all these tests, but we're going to focus on dependent rules, and on a broader base, who qualifies as a dependent. So qualifying child gives you certain tax breaks, and again, we're going to talk about normal straight dependents that don't qualify for those. Welcome back, everybody. Again, focusing on dependents. I missed one category when it comes to who can be, as far as a qualifying child, there's an age limit, 19 for most people, or 24 if they're a full-time student, that you can claim for them as a qualifying child and get the earned income credit and earned income tax credit. One exception that I skipped over is that if your child is permanently and totally disabled child, grandchild, niece, nephew, and you're caring for them, they can qualify as a qualifying child regardless of their age, as long as they're permanently and totally disabled at any time during the year. Then you can claim them as a qualifying child. So again, there are plenty of people taking care of adults, providing full-time support. I knew one family that their son was 40 years old and lived in a hospital bed. They converted their garage because that's the only way they moved the hospital bed and then converted the garage into a room for him. And that's where he was going to live until he died. And he had a weird disease where his muscles slowly atrophied. And when I knew him, he was in his 40s and he could only drink through a straw. And that's all he had strength for. Very sad situation. But again, this is where they're taking care of him. These are his parents for the rest of his life. Now, we're going to step away to dependents. So just not a qualifying dependent. Who is a dependent? So the base rule is that you have to be providing 50% or more of their support through the year. So there's a limit here, and a lot of this changed with Trump tax laws. They called it a Trump tax cuts. And it helped families in some ways, and it hurt some in other ways. So it usually helps to claim the first two dependents for the earned income credit, as qualifying children. But why would you, if you claim someone as a dependent, you can still get credit for $500 for the first couple. After that, it really doesn't benefit you anymore to claim more and more dependents. So you got rid of the incentive to just claim as many children as possible or individuals on your tax return. So there's not so much of a financial reason to do that. However, when you're dealing with collections, it can absolutely help you. So when it talks about just a straight dependent, either they're a qualifying child or a qualifying relative of the taxpayer. So a child, we went over their specific rules, but almost anybody that you're providing 50% of your more of your support can be a dependent on your tax return. And this can provide huge benefits if you do owe taxes and you have to negotiate with the IRS. It can make or break a case. The case I was talking about previously where there was some gambling issues and the husband had $93,000 liability. We didn't include him on her financial statement because they were separated. But then they were trying to reconcile and he moved back in and they were trying to repair their marriage. And so he's not homeless, but he's still unemployed. So now she added him to her as a dependent to her financial statement and can claim him as a dependent moving forward. So all of a sudden it changes her case. So instead of the IRS demanding income from her, it flipped the tables. Now she can qualify for a hardship status where she doesn't have to pay anything. Now, because of those other issues, we have to answer and deal with those first before we can resolve the case. But it can make a huge difference. So some typical examples of dependents are grandparents. If you have grandparents living with you and they're kind of doing their own thing, you can claim them as a dependent on your return. If they are just living on Social Security or disability where they're not reporting that income, that's not a problem. Now, you have a lot of older grandparents, parents that end up in a home. And if they're just paying, it's just from their savings, they don't have much to speak of in the way of income, then you can claim them because a lot of times they're not filing their own returns because they're not working anymore. Now, but if they're getting Social Security income, that counts as income. So we're going to go through a lot of different questions. This is kind of going through a FAQ for rules for dependents. So there's no age limit You still have to have some kind of relationship with the person claiming them. If it's their third cousin twice removed, you're stretching it. But if someone's living with you, you're providing their full support, niece, nephew, um, or a relative, brother, sister. They don't have to be a qualifying child for you to claim them as a dependent. And there's no age limit either. So some of the questions here, and I just had this yesterday. I was out shopping for suits for my son. He's getting ready to go on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he needs a couple suits. So we're out there buying suits, and there's another family there. And we start, of course, I'm one of those guys that I strike up conversations. And good-looking family, and we start talking to them, and their daughter is working, and he talks about, she's 16, she's been working for a while now. I said, that's great. And he's like, can I still claim her as a dependent? Like, well, as long as she's not filing her own tax return, and she's not making more than the exemption of the standard deduction. So the standard deduction for 2024 is $14,600. So the rule is, as long as she makes less than the standard deduction, yes, you can claim her, because if she filed her own tax return, she wouldn't have a filing requirement if she claimed herself. So it gets a little tricky. You say, well, she's not claiming herself, so would she owe that? Quick answer, no. She wouldn't owe that, didn't need to file. Now, if you have a qualifying child, that limit can be $4,400. But again, it's not, you don't have to report that as on your tax return because it's your child's income. So the IRS does allow for children to work, earn money, and not have to file their own return unless they make more than the standard deduction for the year. Now, are they going to be looking at the W-2s for your children and comparing it? No, not really. So again, updated numbers, it's $4,700 if they're a qualifying child. But again, the IRS isn't looking at that very closely. So they have to be a U.S. citizen, again, just like a qualifying child. Citizen, resident alien, national, U.S. national, or a resident of Canada or Mexico from some part of the year. So even though they don't qualify for their own social security number, as long as they have an ITIN or social, you can claim them. So there's ways to get a social and not be a citizen. One of the questions here, this is kind of funny. Can I claim my unmarried partner as a dependent? So you're not filing as primary and secondary on the return as you would if you were a husband and wife. But you can claim a boyfriend or girlfriend as a dependent if they meet all the other requirements. So they must have lived with you for the entire calendar year as well and have your home listed as their official residence for the full year. So, and you can get $500 for dependents who are considered non-child dependents, so they don't qualify as a qualifying child. So one of the questions here, can I claim my baby mama? So same rules apply. You can't, if you're not married, you can't file jointly with somebody. You have to be married to file jointly with someone. But if you're not married, you can still claim them as a dependent and get that credit as long as you have a relationship with them. Now, so they're not too picky about who you claim as a dependent, especially now because it doesn't really affect your tax return and the refund that you get too much. So again, that's some of the questions here, about filing for minors. Do you have to file a tax return for your dependent if they start working? The answer is, if they make over the standard deduction, yes. If they don't, you don't have to. So, again, simple question on that baby mama. Yes, but it has to be a dependent. So you get all kinds of answers and questions here. One of the funny things here is, and I just want to talk about a big thing coming up, is that um, you have plenty of questions as to LGBT relationships. So as long as they're married, you can claim them as spouses. As long as you're providing 50% or more support, I haven't seen a problem claiming them as a dependent. This is still a fairly new area of law. When they didn't have gay marriage nationally, it was more tricky, and the IRS was figuring things out, and so they were allowing people that were living together but not married. But now, essentially, you have to be married and you can get all the rights as filing as married filing jointly. Um, so just be aware of that, and if that can help you, that's a good argument for getting married, so that you can file taxes jointly. It's more common that in LGBT relationships to file separately and maintain separate finances. But if you have dependents living in the home that have been provided, if your partner has a dependent, you can claim them on your tax return as long as they're living with you and they're not being claimed by your partner as well. So again, it's been more flexible, and the rules have improved as far as accommodating different issues for LGBT families. So any other questions? I think when it gets into the details of this, talk to your CPA, talk to your tax preparer, get some good information here. And again, it can be challenging as to who qualifies, who doesn't, who can claim my child. So just remember the big takeaways. There's two big differences here: qualifying child and dependent status. So the rules, it doesn't help you like it used to prior to 2017 to claim a lot of children. You would get people that just would get all kinds of random social security numbers and have, people not related to them at all being claimed. That was a big source of fraud, which is one of the reasons they got rid of it or limited it. But if you are truly claiming and taking care of someone, a parent, a relative, that's low down the luck. And when I see a lot of grandparents, just talked to someone the other day where it was a grandmother providing most of the support, and I asked, is your daughter paying rent? She said no. So she's paying a much higher amount than what the IRS is going to allow for, because she's supporting 3 people, her daughter and her grandchild. But the daughter is claiming herself and her grandchild. So because the daughter's filing her returns, even though the mother's paying for the rent and paying for most of their expenses, more than 50% of their expenses, because the daughter is claiming the grandchild, the grandmother just gets to claim herself. So if someone's working but not working full time, there's times I've had people have those conversations and say, hey, I could really use the help. This would really help me out if I claimed you and your child while you're living here at the house and I'm providing more than 50%. Just be aware, if their income is too high, it can hurt them and their taxes if they're not claimed. But if they're making around the standard deduction, especially less than the standard deduction, there's no reason for them to claim. Or they might get some money back, but it'll absolutely help you a lot more if you have higher income, which is typically the case. So I've had people have those conversations about claiming parents or grandparents that were in a home or dependent on them. And most Social Security doesn't qualify. It isn't over the standard deduction. So be mindful of that. Get some tax advice. Explore that with a tax professional, CPA or tax preparer, and file your taxes in the way that will best help you, but again, following the law and the rules. And it's more generous sometimes. The boyfriend girlfriend thing is more generous than most people understand. So again, thank you for watching here live on smartmoneyculture.tv, either live or on rebroadcast. And again, if you have questions, reach out to us at 520-485-7371 or contact us at guardiantaxlaw.com. And you can always email us at info@guardiantaxlaw as well. And let's get those tax returns in on time by April 15th, or get those extensions filed. And remember, I talked about that. You can just print out the page, fill it out, and mail it in. So have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.